The Employment Minister, Eric Betts, joins us from Hobart. Thank you, Eric Betts, for joining us this morning. Now, I noticed that the Commission Chairman, Peter Harris, wants to move very quickly past short-term political debate here. Your job, seems to me, is going to be divorcing work choices from this new review. How are you going to do that?
We announced 4 months before the election that we would have this Productivity Commission review, that it would be broad-ranging and that we want everybody within the community to have input, whether you're a single employee, a micro business, a big business organisation, the ACTU, if you're unemployed, if you're a community organisation with interest in this area, if you've got evidence, you should be putting that to the Productivity Commission. That is what we're seeking to do, because we want our Fair Work system to be the very best it can be. And the only people that have anything to fear from such a review are those that know that their arguments can't be supported by evidence.
Now, the Australian public, I believe, will want to know how this is not another go, right now, another beginning to heading towards work choices Mark II. Can you explain the difference?
Oh, look, with great respect, that is not what the Australian people are saying at all. What the Australian people are saying is that, and we put this before them, might I add, before the last election, no surprise, 4 months in advance we said we would have such a review, a lengthy review, substantial review, where everybody could have input. So that was well and truly known by the Australian people. What the Australian people want is the best possible workplace relations system, and that is what we're looking for with an organisation, the Productivity Commission, which has a reputation for economic robustness and social sensitivity. The Productivity Commission was the same organisation that the Labor Party tasked to develop the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and I have faith that the Productivity Commission will deal with the submissions fairly and appropriately, and then we as a government will determine what of the recommendations, if any, we take forward to the next election. Very transparent, open to all Australians, and I encourage all your viewers that have a view in relation to workplace relations to make a submission to the Productivity Commission.
What do you think the minimum wage should be?
That is up to the Fair Work Commission to determine.
Just asking your opinion.
Well, that's what I'm telling you. It's not my opinion. It is for the Fair Work Commission to determine, and even Labor frontbencher Andrew Lee has opined that the minimum wage may not necessarily deal with all the issues of low-wage poverty as some people might think. So what the Productivity Commission has quite rightly said, this is a review to either confirm the so-called workplace relations myths or to bust the so-called workplace relations myths. And I'm not going to try to tell the Fair Work Commission its job, or indeed the Productivity Commission. What I want is the very best for Australian workers, for Australian enterprises, so that we can be the best possible country in the world.
You've put a call out this morning and yesterday imploring people to give them information and come forward to the Productivity Commission with their opinions. I'm simply asking you, do you think the minimum wage is too high?
I'm not going to speculate on that. It's not my task. It is a task given to the Fair Work Commission, and those that believe the minimum wage is too low can make a submission, as they do each and every year, to the Fair Work Commission. The Fair Work Commission determines the minimum wage each and every year at a hearing, and the government each and every year puts in a submission asking the parameters in which the Fair Work Commission should consider the minimum wage, but the government hardly ever says, and I don't think it has for many, many years, both Liberal and Labor have ever said what the minimum wage ought to be. But the important thing is this, and the Productivity Commission itself has said this, that nobody wants Australia to be a low-wage country with a race to the bottom. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to get as many people into work with good jobs, with good job prospects, and how do we achieve that for the benefit of all Australians?
If the Fair Work Commission's doing its good job there and keeping minimum wage as it should be, then why do you need a review that involves looking at the minimum wage?
The Productivity Commission was tasked with a wide-ranging terms of reference. They then went out to various stakeholders asking them, what do you think some of the issues are? And they then put forward a whole host of issues, and you have picked on one that clearly one of the stakeholder groups has mentioned, as a result of which the Productivity Commission has said, yes, we will look at minimum wages. We will look at worker protections. We will look at the bargaining process, and all those issues are put forward in an issues paper, and people can argue in favour of lower minimum wages, higher minimum wages, keeping them as they are, or with some completely different system if that is what they want to do. The important thing is that every Australian with an interest in workplace relations has the opportunity to have input into an important area of public policy. And we as a government before the election said we want the Australian people involved in this discussion, and that is what we have now created, that opportunity, and I encourage everybody to be part of it.
And perhaps you could talk more freely about this issue then, Minister Abetz. Do you think employers should be allowed to set penalty rates, particularly on weekends?
Once again, penalty rates, that is a matter for the Fair Work Commission to determine, and I'm not in the business of...
You don't feel like you can state your opinion on this?
Look, I'm not going to state my opinion on a range of the issues. The purpose of the Productivity Commission review is to be able to aerate, ventilate all the competing arguments and views within the community, and then a trusted body such as the Productivity Commission will come up with recommendations, and then we will further consider those recommendations before putting any that we might adopt to the people at the 2016 election. So it's going to be...
I'm sorry to cut you off. We are running short on time, Minister Abetz. I've just got a couple more questions. Critically, this is looking at workers' conditions, employment conditions, and I assume almost at the top of your list of things to do is to create more jobs. You're in Tasmania, unemployment is high there. How will reviewing workers' conditions create more jobs?
That is a matter for discussion within the Productivity Commission purview, whether they come up with recommendations in that space. Let's wait and see. But the way you create more jobs is to get the budget back into shape, getting rid of the carbon and mining taxes, getting rid of red and green tape, getting free trade agreements underway. That is what's going to stimulate the economy. That's what's going to create jobs. That's what's going to create pathways for job seekers and those already in employment. It's going to provide stability, and that is why we as a government have said fixing the economy has to be the #1 priority of this government. And I just wish Mr Shorten and the ALP and the Greens in the Senate would join us on that task in repairing the economy after 6 years of Labor vandalism on the economy.
Last year, your government had problems prosecuting your case and communicating with the Australian people on reforms that you wanted. What makes you think you'll be able to convince them of the worthiness of the review and then the plans that you have in place for industrial relations?
Well, the worthiness of the review was put to the Australian people 4 months in advance of the last election. We got a mandate at the last election. We are now fulfilling that election promise by having this Productivity Commission review. But in the last 6 months of the Senate, when the Senate changed and the Labor Green majority with its manic determination to block all our election policies. In the last 6 months, we got temporary protection visas through, we got our direct action plan through, we were able to get rid of the carbon tax, we were able to get rid of the mining tax, we were able to get national security legislation through. So we have been able to work with the crossbenchers in achieving certain outcomes. In other areas, of course, we have experienced difficulties, and that is what one expects with a Senate that the government doesn't control. But the last 6 months, I think, saw a number of important initiatives being put through the Senate, which, quite frankly, should have been put through a lot earlier, but for the Labor and Green manic determination not to accept the people's verdict.
We'll see how you go with negotiations through 2015. Minister Abetz, thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot.